politics, climate change, rapid changes in tech and AI. The modern world is more chaotic than ever. So how do brands break through with their customers? The answer is by turning that chaos into context. Hi, welcome to Insights to Activate, Ipsos' new series focusing on some of the biggest topics facing the world today. I'm Ben Meyerson, Director of Marketing and Communications here at Ipsos, and I'll be your host as we talk about key ways that brands can connect their products and services to customers in the modern world. Today, we're going to talk to experts from Google, MetLife, and leaders here at Ipsos about how to break through the clutter and thrive with better positioning, more effective activation, and by delivering on experiences. First, let's get into some facts you need to know to make better decisions. Some context about the chaos, if you will. Let's start with a key data point from our new Ipsos Global Trends report coming out this summer. Do you ever feel overwhelmed by the modern world? Well, I've got some good news and some bad news for you. The good news is almost everyone does. The bad news is almost everyone does. 83% of people in 50 markets around the world, from the US to Africa to Asia, say the world is changing too fast. That's a lot of chaos. And if you don't play your cards properly, your brand can fall victim to a constant cycle of reacting to that chaos and never getting ahead by planning for it. Let's zoom in now on what marketers need to know. We asked Americans a few questions on our Ipsos consumer tracker about what really matters when push comes to shove, and found some revealing answers when it comes to product positioning. When forced to choose, nearly all Americans pick product quality over brand values. Those things aren't always in direct conflict, but it's really revealing about what matters when brands need to pick one to prioritize. Then, when we forced people to choose between buying based on brand loyalty versus buying based on need, the split was narrower, but a majority choose buying based on need. That shows promise for brands trying to break through the chaos in the aftermath of the pandemic supply chain crunch, but it still shows the importance of making sure you can meet customer needs. Today's panel, and our companion report, which I hope you'll read on Ipsos.com, hits on three key ways brands can break through the chaos. First, by positioning your brand. You need to understand customer expectations so you can meet them. Second, by activating your brand creatively. Third, by designing your brand experience so it meets and reinforces customer expectations. Let's meet our panel and get into it.
Ben, thank you for having me. My name is Stephanie Banas-Ryback, and I lead the experience service lines at Ipsos. So that includes customer experience, user experience, and employee experience. And the way that we focus on all of the experience angles together is really to deliver a total experience for our customers and make sure that we're recognizing the role employees play in that experience as well as the role all of our channels play in the experience.
Hi, I'm Coley Corte. I am an SVP and CMO of our regional institutional businesses at MetLife. So our regional businesses include EMEA, which is the Europe, Middle East, and Africa, as well as our institutional businesses, which include our asset management business, known as MIM, and our retirement income solutions businesses. Those are B2B businesses, and regional businesses are both B2B, B2C, and B2B2C. And then I lead customer insights and analytics globally, and that enables us to start with understanding the customer and then designing solutions and experiences and marketing that fits with their needs.
And hi, I'm Pat Howard. I'm Head of Creative Excellence at Ipsos here in the US. Creative Excellence is the advertising research group here at Ipsos, where we use research from the start of the finish to the creative development process, with the ultimate goal of helping our clients make and run better ads that have more returns for their business.
I'm Bethany Poole. I am the Global Director of Customer Advocacy, Impact, and Social for YouTube and Google Ads Marketing. And my job is to find the stories of our customers succeeding on our platform and share them with the world.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Let's start with you, Coley. Let's go to that global trends number, that 4 in 5 people today say the world is moving too fast. How do you show empathy to customers at a time of so much uncertainty?
Well, I think the first thing is really listening to them and understanding where they're coming from. So we do that in two ways. One is we have broad listening programs, Voice of the Customer, listening in all our markets to end customers, to intermediaries, which could be agents or brokers, and really understanding the context in which our customers are operating. We use that to then design solutions. So our solutions take into account the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity of their worlds, as well as the experiences that are designed to be simple and clear. So look, we're a legacy company. We're 156 years old. So there's a lot of complexity underneath it, but we try and make it simple at the surface and really understand our customers and get into a dialogue and personalize our solutions and services to them.
What does that dialogue look like? You talk about getting into a dialogue with your customers. How does that get shaped?
I mean, that could be through a variety of channels, right? That could be in social, it could be on a phone call, it could be responding to emails, claim submissions, it could be in our ecosystem tools. So there are a variety of ways where we're listening and interacting, personalizing solutions, but also delivering back, right? So that's the dialogue we need to be in and understanding their context. And designing solutions that are relevant to them, right? From bereavement services to other things that help us detect anomalies or things that are going on. We had an amazing story where we had someone who called our call center 3 different times in one day. They got 3 different representatives. Those people didn't understand the other 2 phone calls, but our systems were able to bring that together, and we were able to reach out and provide them additional support and solutions based on applying technology and insights beyond the conversation that was happening.
Context, yeah, bring it all together. Very cool. Let's go now to Bethany. So YouTube has come to have a really broad appeal, right? You could listen to music or podcasts. You could watch people vlogging, learning, and socializing. How can marketers make ads feel so personal in that broad array of contexts?
Well, I think that's a really good question. I think YouTube has come a long way. You mentioned there's all sorts of different types of content, but there's also so many different types of ways. I look at YouTube on my phone, I look at it on my computer, I look at it in my living room on my TV screen. People watch over 1 billion hours of YouTube on their TV every day. And what's really interesting about that is that you have that reach. You can reach customers in those amazing moments when they're thinking about discovery of a product or they're going deep on a tutorial, et cetera. But what's really amazing about our platform is that YouTube is kind of unique in it's where people go deep on whatever they're passionate about. So it's where Sunday Night Football becomes 24/7 football because I'm listening to the Kelsey Brothers New Heights podcast in the middle of the week, or my daughter who's obsessed with K-pop, the music becomes K-pop the culture, and she's digging into the fashion and all of that. And so what we're seeing from a marketing perspective is marketers really tapping into that to connect with these leaned in, really passionate consumers in those moments when they're really going deep in that fandom. So I'll give you 2 examples. I talked about the New Heights podcast. DoorDash partnered with the Kelsey Brothers to do a takeover of their channel so that midweek when you're catching up on your football, you're going to think, okay, DoorDash, I need to order some food. Or there's another really interesting example of tapping into culture around the holidays and trends that are happening. So last year, Pepsi, which is not something that you typically think about for the Christmas holidays. There's another competitor out there that's typically associated with that. But they noticed this dirty soda trend. Have you heard about the dirty soda trend? So there was this dirty soda trend going on. So Pepsi tapped into it with this ad that they did with Lindsay Lohan, where she mixed Pepsi and milk, and they called it Pilk. What was crazy is this thing took off. 50 million people viewed it, and then they started putting their own ads together and actually copying it. And so you had this whole engagement campaign, people really, really engaging with Pepsi around the holidays, around this trend. And so you have both an increase in your engagement, but also in consumption of the actual product during the holidays. So those are things that resonate with consumers because they do feel personal, they feel authentic, they don't feel like an ad, they feel like something that resonates with their experience.
And so on top of that, so you have the experiential stuff like that that's baked into the videos and the takeovers, but then also you have the things that roll through the videos. So like when you're talking about what gets targeted to individual places? How do you work with brands to cut through on the more promotional and promoted side of the advertising sets?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll give you another example that I love. Taco Bell has been doing really interesting things, and they did it across all of the different formats you could play with on YouTube. From the ad shorts, which they did, well, the campaign was this. So Taco Bell had a new menu, and they wanted to get the word out about this. So they did 3 things on YouTube. One, they revealed the new menu in a live stream that was in the style of a tech keynote and had millions of people tuning in to their menu reveal. Then they did ads around those particular products across YouTube and across the platform. And then they used YouTube Shorts, and they did a tie-in with LeBron James, who did a little short that was basically like Taco Tuesday, oh wait, it's trademarked. And so that took off as well. So across all of those different surfaces, they really connected and introduced this new menu to their audience and drove, I think it was 18% incremental transactions, which is crazy for an established fast food brand.
Yeah. That's wild.
Impressive.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you get to experiences, when you talk about that stuff, I mean, so that is such a translation when you go from an advertisement that goes out in the world, and you've got celebrities, you've got influencers going in and talking about something new, and then that gets translated to the way that it gets to a retail store. Steph, that's something that you talk about a lot with the experience group, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of that investment that's put into advertising and customer acquisition then needs to come to life in the experience. So the messaging strategy from an advertising perspective is really pushing the brand promise. And of course, that promise is meant to be how you actually interact with the brand and its products or its services. So making sure that there's a connection between the experience and the promise is really critical. We know that, of course, meeting expectations is key. That's the baseline. Obviously, exceeding expectations is phenomenal, and that's everyone's goal. But it's really when expectations are missed that brand equity starts to erode. And that promise starts to become less of something that's trusted over time and more something that's skeptical. And if that happens, of course, all of those big budgets that go into advertising become a little lower ROI because those customers don't remain sticky after they've actually started to interact with the brand and its products. So where we focus in the experience space is really understanding what has been promised to consumers, and then through voice of the customer programs and so forth, looking to see if that expectation is being met. We talked about context a little bit too, so understanding the context of the relationship with the customer is really important. I love the example around having somebody call claims and speak to 3 different people, and then you'd get frustrated, obviously, if you called the third person and they didn't have the history or the context of your conversations. So that's hugely important. We've been talking about omni-channel experiences forever. So it's almost overplayed, but it's true. It really is a critical investment across organizations. Legacy brands like MetLife, of course, have systems that are all over the place. So certainly much more complicated to become omni-channel, or maybe chaotic to actually get there. But when it's done right, when it's seamless, customers feel it. They appreciate the brand. They appreciate the relationship that they're developing with the brand, and they stay longer.
I mean, maybe I could add something to what Stephanie has said, but we're a purpose-driven company, and as part of our purpose, we believe that we're always with you for a more confident future. And in doing that, we need to be able to deliver those experiences, right? That is, if our brand is an expression of our purpose, the experiences are how you live our brand, and that's what has meaning to our customers and to our employees. So the level of care that we provide to employees and customers throughout their experience with us is really important.
Yeah, and of course you're bringing context. You have those tools now, and we have the modern technology that can really help us unify those experiences across channels, across touch points, and make things better for our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Journey analytics and journey orchestration are very key investment areas. And that does connect from the point of acquisition and the ads that somebody saw through to how they become a customer and their lifetime afterwards with the brand. And on top of journey analytics, it's really important that brands continue to realize that a journey is not linear. And you always need to be reacquiring your customers because there's a lot of competition out there who's trying to gain that share of wallet. And if you're expecting someone to become a customer and then follow a journey that was, created in a PowerPoint 10 years ago, and that's going to be, the golden ticket to success, it's not going to be. So constantly measuring the experience, constantly talking to your customers and understanding their changing need states as time goes on, and being really paranoid that someone else is trying to acquire them is key. It's a very chaotic world trying to retain your customer.
Paranoia is the ultimate business motivator.
Yes.
And I should add that I think, asking your customers, and I talked a lot about listening to your customers is important, but I think also observing their behaviors, to your point, that they're making their own choices. So they're, sometimes what you say and what you do are the same, sometimes they're not. So understanding both those elements is really critical to really understanding where the customer is.
Yeah, and just getting that context can help you get above the chaos. Pat, let's get back to the advertising scene. So you and your team have shown that marketers really need to make ads that customers can relate to, and that translates to such a much stronger long-term relationship. But you also have to get their attention in the first place. How do you play that balance?
Yeah, good question. So a recent publication that we did called Misfits really explored the role of creativity in advertising. And what we found in that was, we went into it thinking we would find the role of creativity, but what we found was creativity and empathy are kind of like that 1-2 in terms of delivering effective advertising. So it's not just about doing something new or unique or entertaining, but also about connecting with people on a personal level, reflecting back to them. They see themselves in the commercial, and they say a little bit of the real brand in the commercial as well, in that empathy. And then what we understand with the context is the way that those two things play together actually changes by channel, and it changes by the context that people are viewing it in. Mm-hmm. So for something like a linear TV spot, you're looking for that creative experience, that unique, entertaining humor to really break through and get their attention. But on social media channels and on things like YouTube, you actually find that the empathy and that personal relationship becomes even more important. So some examples that you just gave then, Bethany, of in Pepsi and milk together, mm-hmm. Pilk. That's an example of a creative idea. So that's a new way of presenting. It's a shocking and new way of thinking about it, but it's rooted in the product. It's fundamentally kind of like an informational thing about the product and how you would consume it. Whereas the keynote speech of Taco Bell releasing their tech keynote about the menu, that's more of a creative experience. That's like the way that you're wrapping it up. It's less about product itself. The creativity there is about in the way that you're delivering the message. And then the empathy, what's great about social is the ability, to understand the audiences on a lot deeper level. And you can make so much more creative these days, right? There's so many more ads being made everywhere that you can really start to make more targeted and almost more personalized content in the creative that you make.
Pat, you talk about all the different ways you can break through with an ad, and we had the great examples that Bethany gave. One of my favorite things that we do at Ipsos is what you folks do every year, the day after the Super Bowl, where you look at all the Super Bowl ads and analyze which ones broke through and why. Mm-hmm. The Super Bowl is a chaotic environment, but it's also not because you have so many people hooked to one thing at the same time. What does it take for a brand to break through in that kind of environment? What factors do you see as facilitating long-term success to break through from that chaos?
So it's a good question. So I think linking it back to the discussion, the expectations around a Super Bowl ad are very different. So when everyone's watching the Super Bowl, it's like the one time of the year that people actually want to watch ads instead of trying to avoid them and like skip them or get out of the room. Like people are actually like, hey, what are the ads going to be this year? So that raises the bar in terms of expectations. So when we look at Super Bowl ads, we obviously look at our usual metrics to see if this ad's going to be effective, right? Are people going to remember the ad? Do they know who it's for? Does it make them, want to buy the brand more or be more interested in the brand or build that emotional association with the brand long term? But also in Super Bowl, we kind of add on that second layer of expectations of, is it meeting what people expect from a Super Bowl ad? So we put more weight on things like, is it entertaining? Is it funny? Is it really getting that sort of higher emotional response as well? Because otherwise you can have very effective ads that would work 364 days of the year, but if you put it in the Super Bowl, it just gets lost. People are like, well, why is this ad on the Super Bowl compared to everything else around it?
Bethany, YouTube is where we link to a lot of those ads, and a lot of people go and look at that. What kind of patterns do you see on YouTube that are surrounding the Super Bowl? Do you see folks engaging with ads in a different way, both in the pre-rolls for videos that are watching, or coming back and seeing traffic on YouTube? What kind of things do you see surrounding the ad space in the Super Bowl?
I think there's the moment of the Super Bowl when you're watching the ad, but what's really interesting is that so many brands and so many, to your point, consumers, people want to watch the ads. They don't want to just watch the football game. And so we're seeing a lot of brands that actually are releasing their ads ahead of time and teeing it up so that they may be a different version on the Super Bowl itself. I think we saw that this year with Uber, did a bunch of teasers this year around like teasing, what are the Posh Spice and her husband, Posh and Bex, and then they had their ultimate the ultimate reveal on the actual Super Bowl, and we've seen that with a bunch of others. So I think that entertainment and the build pre, during, and post is something that we're seeing a lot more. I think you've hit a lot of the other ones. Entertainment is really big in terms of people are thinking of it as a show, not just an ad. And then I think there's also experimentation that happens every year. So not to use another Pepsi example, but Pepsi did the halftime show. And so their ad that they ran before, kind of teeing up the halftime show, got viewed, the average length of viewing that ad, which was an ad, was 2.5 minutes even after the show. So it's just amazing what brands can do on these platforms around the Super Bowl, not just the moment, but pre and post.
Yeah, I think it's, on that, I think it's interesting how ads that brands post to YouTube on their channel versus ads that are paid advertising on YouTube. Because the ones that they post to their channel, that's more like content, right? Now we're in the world of branded content where people are choosing to go out and view these, which is a very different space to a pre-roll or something that's popping up in the middle of the video that they're watching. And again, it's a different space and it's a different expectation for brands of what they want to play in there.
But I think even the ads during the Super Bowl are more of that branded experience. To your point, they have to be more than a traditional ad.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there's a trend that way overall in the industry of more people seeing advertising as content overall, and understanding that, there's more of a battle for attention these days. It used to be you're watching TV and then you see ads and you're used to it, so you sit there and you watch them and you have a captive audience for that. These days, so much of advertising is served online, it's digital, it's social. There's so many more opportunities to scroll past it or skip it. Even on TV, if you're watching connected TV, you might pay to not have ads, or you can skip them at certain points. So have to fight for that attention more with all advertising.
Let's talk a little bit more now about the end point of the customer journey, right? The customer experience. So, Stephanie, shopping has evolved to be more convenient, but it's also so much more chaotic now. There's social shopping, voice assistants, e-commerce, and more. How can brands craft experiences that cut through all that noise?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly not easy. Couple keys to success here. One is to actually think about your channel strategies holistically. So recognizing that customers are going to do research in certain channels, actually purchase in other channels, potentially seek service and support in yet another channel, and if it's product, maybe return in yet another. So when thinking about channel strategies and enhancements to the experience across channels, it's really important for there to be an overarching total experience vision. A lot of organizations have different teams that are responsible, say, for the website or the mobile app or the retail experience. And what can happen is each of those different teams are driving against their own experience enhancement agendas, which means some might get ahead of others. But what ends up happening is the customer will start to recognize that they can get something done better, faster, easier in one channel over another. And that's actually not a good experience, right? We want customers to be able to meet any of their needs across any of the channels at the time that's right for them, and it gets a lot into relevancy and so forth too. So important for those teams to stay coordinated even if they're siloed in an organization. Data integration is really key here as well, because we want personalization to be the same whether you're on one channel or another. Very simple example, right? Like, you would never expect to go look at your order history differently on the website versus a mobile app, versus if you speak to somebody who's in a store and pulls up the point of sale system in the CRM, it should be able to see all your order history as well. So it's very key for organizations to make sure that that data is transferring across teams and those roadmaps and strategies are consistent or at least somehow connected across teams. And then one other piece to this, which is unfortunately too often forgotten, is thinking about accessibility across channels. So 16% of consumers have accessibility requirements. And as we continue to digitize more and more, it's important to not forget that, because that's a really large segment to not cater to. And it definitely would indicate some challenges around empathy for customers, right? And I'm sure that would come to life in any voice of the customer programs. So accessibility needs to also be top of mind as brands are thinking about these experiences. Over 40 markets actually have accessibility regulations, so it should be pretty easy to say yes to that one. But unfortunately, we're not as consistent across brands as we'd like to be in terms of that accessibility commitment.
So you talk about, we're talking about the experience, and perhaps this is my mistake. I framed it as kind of the end point of the customer funnel. Again, starting with positioning, going to activation, and then going to the experience at the end. But again, there's so much valuable insight and information you get from measuring that experience at the end. How do you work with companies to then democratize that and bring it up to other parts of the customer funnel?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, so customer experience can live in different parts of organizations. And that's one of the things that's very tricky about it as a discipline. Sometimes it sits within an insights function, sometimes it sits within marketing, sometimes it sits within different product teams even. So first is understanding just where is customer feedback and customer insights or behavioral data being collected across an organization. And then within those teams, making sure that those insights are actually disseminated across. So there's a lot that goes into play around governance for customer experience and having centralized models or decentralized or hybrid. And the purpose of having that governance conversation is to make sure that those insights and that voice of the customer is actually brought to all of the teams that can use the information. There's actually a panel that Pat and I will be on later this year, I think actually in November, so stay tuned, too soon to talk about details. But we're going to be talking about the way that marketing and advertising sides of the business can be using voice of the customer insights, because that actual customer and the things that they care about and the things that they love about the brand are things that we should celebrate in our advertising and not just let that be, known to the insights team.
For sure. I mean, creative is we talk about creative excellence as a journey, not a destination, and you're always looking for incremental gains in making the advertising better. And just because you've got to the end of the one campaign, the measurement of that campaign and the understanding of how it played out feeds the next generation of creative development. So, I think what you said about the funnel it's a very fluid concept, and I think you can look at it that way, because we like to put frameworks around things that help us to understand certain stages, but you also have to understand that not everybody is on that same journey, and we can learn from all sorts of a business and bring it elsewhere.
Yeah, we think about it as a loop, right? We put the customer in the center of that loop, and there's all sorts of phases, because they could be in discovery in one set of solutions while they're engaging and looking for service around another set of solutions. And the way we're working now is we are looking at understanding how you move through consideration, how we build momentum, how you make decisions. And we use that to inform our customer councils, who create a series of actions that we then measure, right, to see their impact in driving our overall customer loyalty index.
Yeah, I really like the concept of thinking about it as a loop, and there's so many layers, right? There's we want to get this customer engaged in more of our product portfolio, which is one layer. Another is we want this customer to be engaging across more of our channels, because the more channels of engagement, the stickier they'll be. And another loop could be we want this customer to not only be a high value customer to us, but we want them to be an advocate to us. And we want to actually use the voice of the customer as a form of, earned media or advertising, right?
I'd love to bring Bethany in there, because I think for a while things, certain channels get pigeonholed as upper or lower funnel and things like that. And it's hard to break out of those constraints. I wonder what your thinking is on that full cycle.
Well, I mean, I would say, as I'm listening to this conversation, yes, we think about YouTube as full funnel now. We're doing more and more. I think it's traditionally thought of as the upper funnel, but I'm going to use a different example than Pepsi. Walmart did some amazing shoppable videos in the holiday season where they were a rom-com series. So it was branded, created content by the brand, but then you could shop within the ads itself. So I think that's really interesting, because or within the videos itself, so then you're taking it all the way down. But related, I think, as we talk about the loops, I think this is where, I work for Google, so it would be strange for me not to talk about AI. But the amazing thing about AI is that it is able to basically both power the creative production so that we can do scaled personalization and then see what works and what doesn't work. And then more quickly surface all of those insights from across all of the different surfaces so that we can, one, find new insights or start to optimize what's working or uncover, oh, there's a consumer need that I didn't know, or they're using it. There's a whole different audience of consumers that I never thought about tapping into that would be perfect for my product. And so I think it's both the thinking across the funnel, but also thinking across all of the different platforms and surfaces and how you pull all of that measurement and insights together so that you can act on it really, really quickly to continuously find those new ways to connect empathetically with your consumer.
We almost got through something without getting to AI. But since we went there, one of the things that I'm most excited about as it relates to creative and customer experience that is very much possible now because of Gen AI is true one-to-one personalization. So when I was on the brand side, one of the companies I worked at was L'Oreal, and we made major investments in customer insights and collecting customer data and being able to personalize moments of the experience across the journey and across channels. And then even though we had the data, and even though we had all of the data integration to really deliver amazing moments and experiences that are highly relevant, we didn't have the creative. So just the amount of creative production that would be required in order to get to the level of granularity that we wanted to achieve was just you can't get there. The production engine would just be so massive. And now with Gen AI, I think back to that experience and that just unbreakable barrier. And I think it's really exciting that that barrier is going down.
Very exciting. It's the one thing I would bring up there is we talk a lot about responsible AI. For a while now, I've got this fear that it's going to happen to a brand, that they will start using AI to deploy personalized content at scale, that will start meeting people with one-to-one messages. And brands are going to get put in alongside messages or positionings or social issues that they don't agree with, that, the machine has decided that this particular topic is really important to this person. So we're going to serve them an ad with your brand in it that's about that topic. And there's a lot of guardrails that we have to put on around that to make sure that it sticks to brand guidelines and that you're doing the true brand voice and it's not just letting loose with problematic advertising for them.
Yeah, grounding the advertising and the brand message and strategy.
Yeah, we don't know. It's the data set that it's trained on that's the most important. So but someone is going to make that mistake, I think. That's my prediction.
For sure. It is, but I think the tools are getting better. I mean, we're still early days, but the tools are getting really good around this. Like with cloud, you can upload your brand guidelines. You can control that, and so you do train the model because it's not going to be one model. It's going to be your model layered with others, so that you can get that personalization at scale, but within the parameters that you want it.
We had a great discussion with one of our experts from Adobe on one of these earlier panels, who was talking about their Gen AI Studio product that they're working on activating with folks that they can do that kind of stuff. They can do creative at scale. And it's really fascinating to see how quickly it's working. I think it's time to go to some questions from the audience. Let's see, so we've got some good ones coming in here. I think, this one is really right on the money for what we've been talking about. And Bethany, as our resident Googler right here, I think we'll start with you, and we'll jump off on AI here. So there is some extra chaos, as we've been framing it, for brands and consumers right now because of the rapid rise of AI. So how does that affect the work that you're doing at YouTube? How do you play with the AI teams in other parts of the company?
So for me and for marketing as a whole and also YouTube, I mean, AI is this thing that allows us to supercharge what we already do. And so I see that in my own day-to-day. I have a social team, so we're playing with how we use AI for Gen AI for social. But I also see it across our creators. So Mr. Beast is a creator that most people know. He was able to expand his audience by using AI to take his videos and dub them in all these different languages. So you can expand your audience. You can start to go, okay, what is this? How do I get it to more people? And then I think the other thing that's really interesting, I think for a long time, YouTube wasn't thought of as something that like a small business owner would go, okay, I don't have time or money or budget to create videos, for example. But with our new AI-powered tools, you can upload a static ad or an image, and it is going to make it into a video. It can make it into a display ad. It can change all the different formats, and then you can go in and play with the background and make it different. You can start to like take your insights about your consumer and all of the different contexts and play. It's your own creative studio that you can then go run, and that is something that a small business owner can do and very quickly get a campaign up and running, and then see how it's doing and continue to optimize. So I think it's lowering the barriers for marketers of all and businesses of all sizes to do really interesting advertising to connect with their consumers and find new audiences.
I think there's an important thing about what you said, which we were talking about this morning in the office, which is there's a moment in time where adopting Gen AI in certain use cases may be a differentiator. There's also a moment in time that if you don't get there, you're just going to be behind, right? And so enabling all these companies that couldn't compete in certain ways to compete is going to level the playing field. And so if you're not there, that's going to be quite a challenge.
Yeah. Thinking about that, just to jump in, thinking about that for the small businesses or people like that. So for us in Creative Excellence, right, we do a lot of traditional pre-testing, you know, predictive measures, optimization of creative, and understand how and why it's going to work. But what we can do now is we can actually use AI, both analytic AI and generative AI, to look at some of this creative and understand how it's going to perform and if it's going to be effective or not, without necessarily the heavy lift and investment of going out to consumers and getting fresh data each time. So, you know, if you're making a Super Bowl spot, you're obviously still going to want to put that through some fairly rigorous human understanding of if it's going to work. But if you're a smaller business or you're looking at activating 50 different social assets, there's now a way of actually understanding which ones are more likely to be effective and which ones are less likely to be effective for a fraction of the cost. So it's much better than the situation where a lot of ads just went with no data on them whatsoever, and we would just kind of see what was working after a few weeks on performance metrics. Now we can start to predict what might work long term, even before launch.
And that gives marketers such a, like, as a marketing team, you have such a better, more credible conversation that you can have with your finance partners too, because you're like, hey, I've tried this. I know what this is. I can predict. I have the testing to say this will work, and I haven't spent a ton of money on it.
It also, we've been talking a lot that marketing is a science, and it's not just arts and crafts, right? It's not arts and crafts, as we all know. But sometimes, you know, some of our partners might think of it that way. But the more technical expertise we can show, the more data, the more insights, the more rigor, the more valid it becomes to everyone.
I invite everybody to go back and watch our panel we had about AI earlier this year. It was a really good discussion, and I think it's something that we're going to be talking about in many future panels going on, including in another one of these panels later this year. So. Let's kick it to you for this next question, Ped. This is pretty clearly targeted at you. So, with more ad platforms than ever, how do brands determine a channel strategy?
It's a good question. There's a lot of complexity. I'm sure AI can help you along the way there. I think really it's about, you know, you got to understand your audience first and foremost, and then you got to find where, you know, it's about where you can find that audience in different ways. I think those paths towards channel strategy are fairly well trodden. Personally, I think where people, you know, a creative-led strategy often is an additional layer to that doesn't get used as much. So sometimes it's about we focus too much on the channel as opposed to the actual where the creative is going to be most effective. Because one of the things we've learned about context is exactly the same ad served on YouTube, served on linear TV, served on a social platform performs wildly different. Right? And it's not just about, part of it is about customizing the way that it is consumed for that platform, but sometimes there's just differences in the message and the insights itself that work differently on different platforms. So I think, you know, for me it would be more of an understanding of channel and creative together, instead of, you know, sometimes we play out the whole media plan on every channel and then we try and fit the creative to that afterwards. And I think if you did those things together, you could have more success.
All right, let's hit the next one here. All right, so Coley, for insurance companies, chaos isn't just a metaphor. There are a lot of things going on in the real world that can affect your business model, again, or financial services business model, since I know you touched that as well. How do you and your team work with all of that chaos in the real world as you market your services and position them?
So I think we go back to understanding the customer, right? And if we understand the customer, understand the situations they are in, understand what that means for our business too, then we can take that complexity and chaos and actually create a degree of certainty, right? So we provide in our insurance products protection. In many of our other products, we are providing a clearer path. And so we are hoping to relieve customers of some of that uncertainty, and we need to understand that uncertainty and model different scenarios and understand the implications. I think the other thing, which Stephanie was talking about earlier, that I think is important is we need to inform everyone all along the way, right? So if you have a question because something's going on in the world, does this impact you? Are you covered for it? Do you understand the solution you bought from us? You should be able to call us. That person that you talk to should have the same view that if you went into your app or you looked at an email you received, right? And like unifying those views and that data is super important for us to be able to make sure you're taking advantage of the solutions you have. So some things we're doing now are more proactive, right? So we're doing some things around connected benefits. So if you file a claim for one type of situation in your employee benefits, we can see if you have other coverage and we can proactively alert you to that. In our embedded insurance business in Latin America, we're doing some things with gig workers where we have a coverage of drivers, and we'll know based on the data if they were in an accident, they need something to happen for them. So I think that interplay of understanding the complexity of the world, understanding the customer's complexity, understanding our solutions and designing solutions around that, and then designing the experiences.
All right, so one more question here, and let's get one for you here, Steph. So,
sure.
So you mentioned you also oversee user experience work.
Mm-hmm.
So some people could argue that no matter what, digital channels and their information overload are inherently chaotic.
Yeah.
So what do you think brands need to consider to make it easy for customers to engage digitally?
They are inherently chaotic because there's essentially no end to the content that can be available to you. I guess it was more than a couple of years ago, but do you remember when all of the websites were investing in these big like flash players, and you'd get to the website and it's just like, God, how far do I have to scroll before I can get to information and stop this like motion from happening? Or if you tried to go to a site from your phone, it was just actually impossible. I think it's really important for brands to recognize that sometimes the thing that's cool and snazzy isn't necessarily the right answer. And actually think about the context of which that brand operates, right? Like someone would not expect that when they go to the MetLife website. They would expect to be able to find the information that they want. So thinking about your branding and the identity of your brand in digital experiences is really key, and the types of needs that someone comes and engages with your brand digitally for is certainly the baseline. Then from there, it's really about employing best practices, right? Like don't get cutesy with a hamburger menu. Everyone knows what a hamburger menu is. We know that's how we find the site navigation, so just stick to what people know. There's certain things that are very intuitive, and they're intuitive for a reason. So when it comes to user experience and usability, deploy the best practices, right? There's other ways to be cute. There's other ways to differentiate. And then beyond that, it's really continuously testing those experiences and testing the way somebody arrives at a site versus a mobile app's subpage, thinking really carefully about your information architecture and the flows that someone would actually navigate through, and having design systems in place so that the way that something is experienced on one digital channel is consistent on another channel, because all of them are following those design guidelines.
And you talked about accessibility earlier,
Yes.
being a big part of the experience practice. So does that interplay at all? Does making things more accessible have knock-on effects for other parts of the website and other folks around the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a little bit of a trade-off. So there are certain fun design things that you might want to do with an experience that are not accessible. So again, it goes back to thinking about who your customers are. 16% of the population has accessibility requirements. So if that is a large segment of your target audience, then make sure you're catering to that audience with your experiences. But it's definitely something to test into. So a lot of brands don't test accessibility as part of their new product launches, new experience launches, and that's something that we're continuously recommending because it is not only a large segment of the customer base, it's also a growing one.
Well, folks, I think that is all the time that we've had today. I think it's been a really great conversation. I love the way that we wove the conversation across all of our different expertises. So thank you all so much for joining today. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us. If you haven't yet, I highly recommend reading our companion report, which explores each of these 3 ways brands can break through the chaos of the modern world by turning it into context. We have one more piece of the Insights to Activate brand series coming, a client impact story, talking about how Ipsos has worked with MailChimp to reach a new client base. And join us after that for our next topic, ESG, and why brands may already be doing more than they realize.